Killing Floor 2 is a great game. Not perfect, but far from bad. Although I can understand how a wave-based survival horde shooter doesn't appeal to most gamers. On Twitch and YouTube, KF2 players are plentiful but don't get nearly as much traffic as the other regular attractions. Killing Floor 2 is a niche game, and that is reflected in my personal experience as well. I play it infrequently and go between loving it at the best of times and questioning why I even loaded it up at the worst of times. But in general, when I want to play Killing Floor 2, the experience is positive. My friends, though, played it a handful of times a few years back and haven't touched it since, either because they don't enjoy the gameplay enough to dive in deeper or because they feel there just isn't enough content on offer to warrant further play. And I don't blame them. Killing Floor 2 isn't structured the same way most big titles nowadays are. It boasts the action-packed, mechanically intricate gameplay as the heart of the experience and has marginalized the more aesthetic features that many gamers, casual or not, take for granted. Let's just be honest about this. Killing Floor 2's menus are ugly. I don't know who was in charge of designing them, but it really looks like the menus were an afterthought during development. And the only reason I bring this up is because if certain players struggle to navigate in-game menus, that might dissuade them from trying to play the game at all in the future. And the crown of worst menu has got to go to that crime against nature inventory menu. As much as I detest overbearing cosmetic markets in gaming, I have to acknowledge that games like Fortnite and Apex Legends did something right in this regard. They plaster the fact that you can buy character and weapon skins all over the menus. What this is, basically, is jingling shiny keys in front of the player. The more they're exposed to those cosmetic items, the more they'll want to chase after them, and that desire to earn pretty customization items will drive players to play the game more. Killing Floor 2 fails miserably on this front. I didn't even know there were unlockable cosmetics and loot boxes until I started browsing the menus out of boredom after having put a solid 50 hours into the game. Of all the players who've ever touched Killing Floor 2, how many of them do you think ever got past the 20-hour mark, let alone 50? To be fair, it's obvious that the game has character customization, but because there was nothing explicitly encouraging me to earn loot boxes or even pointing me in the direction of the inventory menu, I had no incentive to play the game more. So I can only imagine how many potential die-hard fans of Killing Floor 2 never came to be purely owed to the game's repulsive menu design. But let's put aside the extrinsic factors now. What about the gameplay? Basically, it's gorgeous. Killing Floor 2 is a wonderful, ultra-violent power fantasy in which the player must survive seemingly arbitrary amounts of diverse mutants that, for some reason, attack the player in waves of increasing sizes and are followed by one of 4 unique bosses who come to kill you but are back the next match. Okay, listen. Tripwire Interactive isn't concerned with delivering a riveting narrative experience like Rockstar or Naughty Dog. They felt that a compelling story and deep characters were worth sacrificing in the interest of bolstering the gameplay itself. And they did a great job at that. I don't mean to sell them short though, Killing Floor 2 has a lore, so to speak. Just by spending a few hours in the different maps, you'll notice a certain connective tissue. All over the buildings and even on some of the guns is the Horzine logo. Now, with all the wisdom I've gathered over the years, punctuated by a single lore explanation video I saw on YouTube, I gather that Horzine is the big bad corporation responsible for the outbreak of Zeds. Yeah, not zombies, Zeds. Get it right or face the unadulterated fury of the Killing Floor 2 equivalent of an Undertale fan in your mentions. And responsible for the outbreak and continued production of Zeds, at least in part, are Dr. Hans Volter and the Patriarch. Formerly brilliant scientists, Horzine exposed them to ungodly amounts of 5G radiation, and so their sole purpose in life is now to ride the coattails of the hordes of Zeds they created, which are vastly more enjoyable to play against. The Zeds range from trash-tier PvZ-style shamblers to unnaturally mutated or weaponized freaks, all the way up to hulking abominations that defy every rule of human biology. The way the enemy forces are balanced is not nearly as straightforward as other horde shooters. Just because clots and crawlers are quick to kill does not mean you can neglect the threat they pose. And just because Skrakes and Fleshpounds are the strongest enemy types does not mean you need to focus all your attention on them. The Killing Floor 2 meta is an interesting and malleable one, as you're bound to see a glaring difference between how novices play the game and how experts play it. If you think you can regularly win matches going for only body shots, then you'll never make it past the hard difficulty, especially if your perks aren't sufficiently leveled. Which is another gripe I have with KF2's design. It takes so long to level up perks, unless you're playing on Hell on Earth, that I am, again, not surprised so many people shelve this game before hitting the 10-hour mark. The XP gain is absolutely grueling. I have every reason to believe that it was an intentional design choice on the devs' part, but it effectively turns regular gameplay into a grind. Whether you're looking to max out every perk as soon as possible or not, the gameplay is a grind. I have enjoyed playing every perk Killing Floor 2 has on offer, but owe to the fact that only certain perks are viable when playing solo, on higher difficulties, with a controller, The amount of XP I gain from playing my less favorable perks has me disheartened enough to neglect them most of the time. I play the perks I enjoy, meaning that I seldom touch Berserker, Medic, or Sharpshooter, which I consider to be a win on the devs' part for making the majority of the perks either extremely enjoyable or passably useful. You can prestige a perk once you hit level 25, a risk I have only dared take with Gunslinger, which allows you to run through all the trouble of leveling it up again, with an incrementally increasing XP boost each time. I have leveled up one perk one time. I am genuinely unsure if I want to do it again with any other perk because the benefits of the high level attributes far outweigh the pretty hexagon you get around the perk's logo after prestiging it. But back to gameplay now. Headshots are king. If you want any chance of beating large Zeds and bosses on high difficulties, you need to prioritize headshots. An excellent game mechanic that adds both a sense of realism to the ultraviolent world of Killing Floor and a skill barrier that separates the noobs and pros. Easy enough to allow the most aim-challenged players a fighting chance, and so satisfying that you'll spend hours chasing the high of hearing multiple consecutive rack-em-up dings, Killing Floor 2's headshot mechanic may as well be the main attraction. The combination of delightful shooting mechanics and diverse Z types makes no match like another and is one of the only things that'll keep you playing long after your friends either rage quit or insisted they'd be sticking to Black Ops Zombies. The movement is a bit sluggish, with the player unlikely to outrun most Zeds on suicidal or higher, but it does help exacerbate the rush of adrenaline and dread you would most assuredly feel if these monsters were bum rushing you in real life. But don't worry, you can sprint backwards without tripping. Thank you kindly, Tripwire. The melee bash is nothing short of a godsend, as a well-placed strike to the head will insta-kill trash Zeds and could mean the difference between life and death when low on ammo. If Skrakes or Quarter Pounds get too close, you can whack them for a momentary window to escape or finish the job. Every map comes filled with doors for the player to weld as a means to temporarily stave off Zeds or even manipulate kiting routes. The support and demolitionist perks can repair broken doors and set off explosive traps on intact ones respectively. For the rest of the perks though, welding doors is a one and done deal. Once the Zeds breach it, whatever tactical advantage you had while it was sealed is gone for the rest of the match. This adds a level of depth to the game I would have liked to see them expand on. Doors are the only thing you can weld, and only 2 perks can uniquely interact with them. The objective game mode added more use for the welder, but honestly who cares? I'm talking about more environmental interactions for the player to manipulate during gameplay, without the distraction of a cog that needs to be lugged around the map. Survival mode does have a randomly occurring optional zone that awards players bonus dosh for getting kills inside the area, but this feature is very hit or miss. Sometimes it comes at the perfect time in the perfect location to maximize winnings. Other times, it's a high enough wave that large Zeds consistently knock you out of the zone or you're already set for the endgame and don't need the extra dosh. Either way, it was a welcomed addition that helped spice up gameplay by forcing me into parts of the map I wasn't all too familiar or comfortable with. There's an endless mode for anyone who can stomach gameplay modifiers, don't get me started, but for the most part I find myself, time and time again, coming back to a long survival game, unnuked, playing Commando, SWAT, Gunslinger, or Support. I found my rhythm with Killing Floor 2, and that's allowed me to play long past the time I would have if I dismissed this game along with my friends years ago. But now, while enjoying my most recent stint as a basement-dwelling, post-apocalyptic mutant-killing, inhumanly resilient firearms enthusiast, something happened that disturbed me so deeply I have since lost hope for the underrated gem Killing Floor 2 once was. I heard about a new pistol for the Gunslinger perk, so, eager to try that bad boy out, I reinstalled Killing Floor 2 only to be unable to find the gun in-game, and then I learned I would have to purchase it, not for dosh or special event tokens, for actual money. Perplexed as I naively thought this would be a one-time thing, I noticed how over the coming weeks the Mosin Nagant and Riot Shield Glock combination were also added but locked behind a paywall. They added a lightsaber, possibly the only thing that would compel me to pick Berserker back up for a few matches, and it's only accessible through a microtransaction. Players have been asking for a bow and arrow for I don't know how long, and when their prayers were finally answered, they had to dish out extra cash if they even wanted to touch it. Killing Floor 2 is no stranger to microtransactions and loot boxes. I know that. The in-game inventory is filled with items you can unlock through hours of dosh collection or by buying crate keys for real money. I never had any interest in spending actual money on the game because as soon as I found out the inventory existed, I noticed I had unlocked a few neat hats and stuff already, just by playing the game. And I'm sure you, a high IQ viewer of this channel, does not need to be reminded that cosmetics have no impact on gameplay. Part of what makes KF2 so satisfying in-game and in concept is the variety of guns. Killing Floor 2 is peak ultra-violent gun porn. Each weapon is so distinct from the rest that they essentially have personalities of their own. Certain guns are, in the player's mind, tied to specific playstyles and viability levels. Have you ever noticed that you don't think about certain guns as actual firearms and more as combinations of their price, tier, and damage output? Instead of thinking about what the weapon is, it takes on a more personalized style and you end up only remembering how it feels skills to use. That, combined with the still unique and quite satisfying weapon animations, means that the guns are as much an integral part of the Killing Floor 2 experience as the movement or Zeds. The guns are such a fundamental aspect of the gameplay that locking any of them behind a paywall cripples this game's recommendability. After years of playing Killing Floor 2 and trying in vain to get other people to hop on the hype train with me, it feels like a slap in the face for Tripwire to introduce microtransaction weapons, especially doing it so late into the game's lifespan. This will only make the game more difficult to recommend to friends who weren't sold on it before all the cool free guns were added. I understand. The developers need to pay the bills, and having purely cosmetic microtransactions would not work out the same for Killing Floor 2 as it has for Fortnite and other industry giants, due in large part to the game's small player base. This is a niche game in a niche genre. The players tend to spike right around seasonal events, but for the most part it seems that a minority of the people who own Killing Floor 2 played regularly, and even fewer players spend money on cosmetics to help keep the studio afloat. I get it. Locking guns behind a paywall makes sense from a business perspective, but doing so years after release, after having established a pattern of free guns and maps in regular updates, after the devoted players got comfortable with the game's payment model, feels like a betrayal of Killing Floor 2's core player and fan base. I don't mean to sound melodramatic, but this whole situation is a lot like when your girlfriend with a lovely personality, one who has no social skills or talents to speak of, but who treats you like the king you are, suddenly turns ungrateful and begins demanding more of you as a partner, despite your years of devotion and telling your friends how great she is once they just get to know her. Killing Floor 2 is dying, not necessarily in terms of pleasing or maintaining players, even though we know those aren't the game's strong suits. Killing Floor 2 is dying because one of its most foundational building blocks, the guns, has been monetized. Yes, you can play the game without spending a dime after purchasing it, but you can no longer make use of and enjoy every gun the game has on offer without dishing out extra coin. This will be a staggering obstacle in the way of me recommending Killing Floor 2 to people in the future, and will surely prevent interested parties from ever picking it up. But as any honest developer of a microtransaction-laden game will tell you, the majority of their bills are paid by long-time whales who are inexplicably dedicated to pouring all their earnings into a handful of games. At the end of the day, any game developers out there are more than welcome to change payment models years after release and use the mere existence of diehard fans of the game to justify it. Just don't expect all of us to eat it up. As always, I love discussion and debate, so if you have any criticism of my take on the slow death of Killing Floor 2, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.